Alright, 2012 Mini Cooper S with the N18 V16 MO engine. Now, the stem seals on this one don't look like much, but pretty involved job to get involved with. You're going to need your locking tool for the engine itself. You've got to take the chain off, or at least loosen the chain off. Got to take the camshafts out. And a kit like this, which is a stem seal kit, which you can do keeping the cylinder head on. Use air pressure down the spark plug hole with this tube, which will allow the valve to stay shut. Now, it's a much easier way of doing it rather than taking the head off. However, it is more time consuming, I would say, but it does save you a bit of time pulling the head. So obviously I've already started stripping this one down. We'll assume that obviously you can get to this stage if you're going to attempt this job. Airbox out, we've disconnected the battery, wiring looms and bits and pieces that are connected to this. Obviously rocker we need to get underneath here. So obviously I've already undone all the bolts. I've got obviously the core packs out as well, so they're up there. So we need to get essentially anything out of the way so we can get this off. So as you can see, I've already taken it off. So we'll get this off now. Obviously under your bolts, get this off, and have a look underneath what's going on, and we'll come back. Right, so rocker cover off. Obviously now we can see what we're looking at inside here. Obviously the valve stem seals are underneath. Obviously these springs. So obviously the camshafts have got to come out. Now I'm going to take the plugs out, so when we turn the engine over it's easier. We're not fighting against compression. And I've noticed this as well, which is not ideal, which is the guide is broken. It should sit on top of there, on the top of the chain, but it's obviously not been doing its job. Luckily enough, it hasn't broken up and fallen into the chain itself, so I'll replace that while we're here. So next thing we're going to do, we need to get our locking tools in a minute and get them onto our, these I've got square sections cut out of them. You can see we've got straight edge on the other side, we've got a straight edge, we've got a half moon here. Now where this radius is, this is 180 degrees out, so your tools like this will lock in place over the top rather than the half moon shape. It's got to be squared up. So we need to turn this engine over until we get these almost lined up, and then we can obviously have a look at putting our flywheel pin in, which we'll have a look at in a minute. So I'll get these plugs out, we'll get underneath, and then we'll rotate round until we're almost there with this. And then I'll put our flywheel pin in so we know the bottom end's locked up. So I'll come back in a minute. Right, okay, so turn our wheel off, got our arch liner out of the way. We need to get to this crank bolt. Now we've rotated the engine round so that we're on these almost square. Now when the locking tools are on, these will be perfectly level. In other words, we'll have perfectly level squares using these two tools to lock the cams up. So we've come round till almost level, so when we come further they will come further round. Now we're going to go underneath and use this tool, which will slide through a hole in the bottom of the engine and it will lock into the flywheel. So we're going to rotate our crankshaft until this slots in. It's going to be a bit difficult to film it because I need free hands, so we'll rotate it until we're somewhere near, we'll click it in and we'll come back and have a look. So let's go underneath. Right, we're underneath now. So the bottom of the engine, between the exhaust and the gearbox, you got, well, there's two holes. We're not looking at the bottom one, we're looking at the top one up there. So this tool will slide in this hole and it will stop. Now we've got obviously our crankshaft, we need to turn clockwise on our bar, and as we're turning this, we need to put pressure on this, pushing inwards this direction to push it and engage it into the flywheel. so I'm not allowed to film this, but I'm going to turn this clockwise, so that way, turn it clockwise, and this will lock in place, and then you won't be able to turn this anymore, and that'll be the flywheel locked up. So we'll get it locked up and we'll come back. So see now, we've gone in a lot further, and we're locked in place, and we can't move that anymore. So that's our flywheel locking pin in. So now we can go to the top and see how far these are out. They should be relatively right unless the chain's stretched. But we'll go to the top and we'll get these set up on. So we'll go back up top and have a look. Right, back up top, when you see that our cam shafts, we've got straight edge, straight edge, straight edge down the back. Same on these two straight edges and a straight edge over the top to match the profile of this and this. Now this should now just slot straight over that, like that. You see, meets the profile. Sits flush here and sits flush on here. Now there is a bolt hole there where you can go through. Sometimes I line up, sometimes I don't. Try and bolt it if you want to. Not worried too much at the minute. That back one as well slides over. Now you can see we've got a gap there at the minute, but that's because obviously the camshaft isn't set in position properly. This, if this was on here properly, it'd push down and bring the camshaft around. So this will close up. I'm not overly fussed about that for the minute. We just need to get it somewhere near so we know where, somewhere there for when we undo the chain. Now we know we're basically there with this. Next thing we want to do really is take the tension off the chain. Tension is down the back here, underneath here. That bolt you can see there is the chain tensioner, 27mm. Need to get down there and loosen that off so that we can take the tension off the chain and get these locks into place. Then we can obviously undo our bolts on the end. So get the chain tensioner out and come back. Right, okay, so I've taken out our induction pipe between here and here. Got down the back, got the tensioner out of that hole there. We've had to also take out our solenoid that's on the back as well, because you can't get on the tensioner if you don't take it out. So that's then taking the tension off of the chain down this side. Then you need to hold 27mm spanner on here, undo the E14 here, undo the E14 here, so that the cam sprockets are then loose. So we can then undo these, take the sprockets off and hold the chain up. We're going to cable tie the chain up and out of the way to hold it up so it doesn't fall down into the engine, otherwise then we've got a lot more stripped down. So yeah, down the back, boost those off, tensioner out, obviously take your solenoid out first, tensioner out, and then you've got to slack on the chain obviously after you've undone your thing. Counter hold, make sure you counter hold on the 27mm spanner flats. Undo these, pull these out, then we're going to get our chain and cable tie up. So we'll get the sprockets off, get the chain held up, and we'll come back. Right, so we've undone our sprocket bolts. Obviously pull our sprockets off, the chain, all we've done is put a M6 bolt through there and cable tied it up to hold it from dropping down into there. So we're out of the way. Obviously, two cam sprockets, they've got in and exhaust written on them, so you can't really get them mixed up, but try and keep the bolts with them. We've taken our vacuum pump off as well, 2 bolts, taking them off. So this cam is now ready to go. Bolts, this will undo them. Don't worry obviously where the cam is at the minute, clearly the valve's all going to shut and we undo it, but so we'll undo these, obviously bolts on the cam caps, then that cam will be free. This one's a little bit more involved, but to get this one out we have to take the fuel pump off as well. So loosen off your fuel rail, 17mm top, it's a T30 here, and then down the back you've got your union. This will squirt fuel, it's under pressure so have a bit of rag. If it's been, or the ignition's been on in the last few hours, you can have pressure in the system. So next thing we're going to do is undo the 3 bolts here, and then unbolt the whole fuel pump assembly, leave this pipe connected. Obviously you've got to plug down the other one, plugged out the way, but try and just jiggle that out and leave it down here out of the way, and then we'll be free to get this camshaft out. So we'll get our pump off now, and then we'll come back and have a look at getting these cams out. Right, so fuel pump's pulled out. So obviously we've undone the 3 bolts, 2, 3. Just give it a wheel and pull it out. Fuel pipe's still connected. So there's a little O-ring here to be careful of. Pull it out. Put it to the side. Obviously now we've undone the 8mm bolts, 6mm bolts, 8mm head on top of these cams, so we can now lift them off one by one, try to keep them around the same orientation as they are on the camshaft and keep them in the same order. So lay them out in the order they come out and the same way around, because obviously they're worn to a certain rotation. So we'll pull these ones out and get this cam out, and then we'll start looking at this camshaft, which is a little bit different to get out. Right, so we'll remove this one as well now. Bolts, you've got 2 on the back, 1 in the middle, all the way along. You've also got this cap here as well, so obviously you'll need to pry up. It's being held by the Valtrin motor. When you take that off, all these are going to go flying everywhere. Don't worry about it, just gather them up. Try and keep them in some sort of order if you can. And just lay them out. The springs are going to go everywhere as well, but again we'll deal with that when we put it back together. So just take these out, line them up, and then after that we're looking at taking out the lifter and the rocker arm. So we can pull them all out. Again, you need to keep these in order. Same with this side, take these out of the way and then you can pull these out. Again, keep them in order. And then once we've done that, we're almost ready to start setting up for our spring compressor on top. So we'll get these all out of the way and I'll come back. Right, okay, so we removed all our lifters and rocker arms. So these are the old stem seals. I've done the job because it's really difficult to try and film it, but I'll run you through. And you set this tool up, obviously you've got your toolkit. You're going to want to set up something like this. Now, obviously you've got your end plates bolted down, and you've got a bar which goes through the holes. And the idea of this is that you can get this tool and you can put it on the bar over the top of the valve, and you can push down on this handle and it will push obviously the top of the valve down to expose your collets. And once you can get your collets out, then obviously the spring will come off. But before you do that, you need to put your airline, screw it down into the spark plug hole, hook it up to an airline. That will then pressurise the cylinder and will keep all of these valves in this cylinder shut against the cylinder head. So do not attempt to take these out without compressed air going into this cylinder, otherwise you risk losing the valve down into the cylinder, because obviously the only thing holding that valve up from falling in is going to be the spring collets, if you like. And then as soon as you pull the stem seal out, you lose any resistance against the valve stem and it's likely to fall into the cylinder, which is what we're trying to avoid. So wind down your tube, so set your mounts up. You're going to have to move these because obviously you can see this one's over the spark plug hole, but you can move them about as you go along. I did that one there, this one was here, so I did the 2 centre ones first and then moved it across. This one, moved it across and did this one. So wind this in. You need to have an airline to do this job obviously. Bar across, set your tool up, that just comes apart, pin comes out of it. Set your tool up, underneath the bar, stick, and then push down. When you push down, it'll click, and then so you'll release the little tiny collets from in here. So if you're this far in the job, I'll assume that you understand about getting the collets out. But just take them out. Obviously, then you can lift your valve spring off. The air pressure will be keeping the valve up. You can grab hold of your, get these tools, just grab hold of your stem seal, pull it off, get your new one, pop it on, and then obviously your valve spring back on. This, pull down again, and put your collets back in. So, which I've done these as I said. So that's a quick overview of how you put the tool together. There might be variations of this, but essentially the same thing, but make sure you've got air pressure in that cylinder that you're working on, and make sure you're obviously working on the same cylinder as your air pressure is in. Otherwise, you're going to be opening up a can of worms if you lose a valve in a cylinder. So now we can obviously remove all this lot, get it out of the way, and then we'll start putting our cams back in, back cam, and obviously the two back cams and the front cam. Again, we've laid them all out, make sure these all go in obviously as they came out. Get this back assembled, and then we'll come back and look at this, getting this back together. Right, so we put our back cam in, as we've bolted it round, so the stop is pretty much on the stop. Hasn't got to be bang on, but somewhere close, with the motor will adjust. Put your cap back on. Now, stand your intermediate rollers back up. And now it's time to try and put this back on. Now, this is a bit tricky, this bit. Trying to get this on, you need to line up these rollers inside these here. Now, you'll probably knock these off several times before you get this right, so you will start to lose your mind, but persevere. You need to lay it on and then start to tighten the bolts up slowly, obviously to pull it down. So obviously try to lift it over, slide it down, make sure these don't get jammed up, make sure these are all in between these. I'll show you when it's on. So I'm going to get it on now, and we'll come back and have a look. Make sure the springs aren't at the minute, obviously the springs are out of the way. Make sure they're not catching up on anything underneath. When you do it up, don't jam it up, be careful. So get this on, and I'll come back and have a look. Right, so we're now bolted down this lot. Now these springs will obviously still be like this, facing forward. They won't be anywhere near where they need to be. Now they need to be, the bottom of the spring needs to be engaged down in here, behind this, in this little notch. So, as I said in the video before, at least, you know, you should use a special tool for this. However, this is what I use, easily made. Screwdriver, cut a notch in it, and you can get hold of the spring, pull it backwards, and clip it in. Difficult with one hand. So it's fairly straightforward with something like this. So now we've got all the springs back relocated. We've just got to make sure that they're sitting in the notches. Can't really see, but they're sitting in the notches behind, in there, in the grooves. Make sure that all your rollers are in, obviously lined up as well. Try and do that before you tighten it down, and then nip all these bolts down. So that's that now. So we'll get the front cam in now and come back. Right, so camshaft's back in. Once we've done the cam carriers up, when you put them in, you need to make sure that you get, as we said earlier, make sure you've got your flat spots on the top. And then you can put your timing tools over and lock them down. They need to be flat against the cylinder head. And bolt them down. So that's now holding the camshafts in place. Now we can get our chain, wrap it around our sprockets and put our bolts in loosely. Don't tighten the bolts up, just allow the sprockets to move. So get the chain back round, sprockets on, we'll get them back on and come back. Right, so put your chain back on your sprockets, leave the middle bolts loose, just so they're floating. Wind your tensioner in, which will then pull the chain into place. Once you've done that, then you can tighten the middle bolts up. Obviously they're being held by this at the minute. I always put a spanner on it at the same time just to counter hold it. And then tighten your bolts down. So then in theory the chain is then set and tightened up. As we put a new one of these on, because obviously the other one was broken, but then you can put your top rail back on. And then we're pretty much ready for vacuum pump, fuel pump, and then rebuilding the top. So obviously a new rock hold gasket, etc. So we'll get our fuel pump back in, get our vacuum pump back in, take our locking tools off now. Obviously you've got to remember the ones in the bottom as well in the flywheel, so locking tools can come off. Put our bits and pieces back in and we'll come back and have a look. Right, everything's back together now. So vacuum pump, fuel pump back on, all the airbox and that's back on. Obviously we put our plugs and core packs back in. We're going to leave the core packs unplugged for a minute so we can crank the engine, get oil around it all, and also if we've got a problem obviously it's going to stop on the starter rather than starting up and having an issue. We've checked our time, we know we're good, but it's a precaution. Make sure you take your pin out of your flywheel before you start cranking, otherwise you're going to have problems. So make sure everything's plugged back in, and hopefully when you restart the engine it will run for a little while, let it idle, and your smoke should start to clear. You're going to have smoke obviously from what's left in the exhaust system, should take a little bit of time to clear, but after a while you should see your oil consumption be back to using no oil as such, and then yeah, no more smoke out of the exhaust. So I hope this helps. So do stem seals.